Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Pigley, your host here on Gaming Imperfectly, the most imperfect gaming channel on YouTube. And happy Halloween, guys. We did it. Happy Samhain, All Hallows Eve, whatever you want to call it, guys. Whatever you want to call it. I hope you have the happiest of Halloweens. And we are here, guys. 31 Days of Horror! It's the last day of our 31 Days of Horror series. You know what, guys? I'm going to do a little something different today. Instead of reviewing a movie, I am going to tell you something about my life.
This is so effed up.
A true ghost story. A real-life ghost story. Something that happened to King Pigley a long time ago when he was a boy. But not so long that it was an overactive imagination. So stick around, guys. Let's get into the story. How about that? And if you're new to the channel, welcome. I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see. And also, guys, stick around at the end of the video where I'll be reading comments from all you wonderful people because I love reading comments from you guys. You guys take time to... Whoa.
Wait a minute.
What's that?
Did you just see that?
It was a ghost.
Did I see what?
That, Chris.
That's all right. We're
What
okay.
that was that?
It was like a see-through shape, like a ghost.
Speaking of which, let's just get into the horrific story of King Pigley's ghost tale. How about that? And we'll just jump into it. So, believe it or not, a long time ago, King Pigley was a little boy, and as all stories start,
I don't even
it
trust
was
what I've been seeing.
I was young, I was frolicking, and still he insists he sees the ghost as he thrusts his fist against the post. I know, that's backwards. Thrusts his fist against the post. Anyway, back in the 80s, King Pigley was a handsome and mischievous little boy. And I would go stay the summers with my grandmother, my mom's mom, and we called her Granny. And I loved Granny. I loved Granny very much. But see, the thing is about Granny is that Granny was old even when I was little. Now, my grandmother, Granny, lived to be 96 years old before she passed away in 2010. But the thing is that she had my mother extraordinarily late in life. And so she was in her 40s when she had my mother. So by the time I was born and became the young and virile young man that you see before you today. No, I mean, before, when I was finally even in my youthful years, when I was 9 and 10 and whatnot, my grandmother, Granny, was already old by then. And when I say old, guys, I'm talking about she was in her 70s when I was a young man, or young kid. The thing about it is that, you know, as much as I loved her, her house always kind of creeped me out. And I never knew why. You know, I never really quite grasped, you know, I was a kid. I didn't know why things were creeping me out. I didn't know what was going on.
Whoa,
Oh my God.
Whoa, you gotta
Oh
be
my God.
What the hell is going on? Oh my God, that scared me.
You knocked into it, right?
But later in life I found out. And so I'll give you the backstory, which is information I did not have as a little boy. See, tragedy has been a part of King Pigley's life for most of my life, to be completely honest. It's always been kind of tragic. I've had a tragic kind of upbringing. I've not had the bestest of times as a young boy and whatnot.
I'm not imagining
Ooh, shiny things.
I saw things too.
So,
I saw what happened to Josh in the shed. You know, that's what I'm worried about.
I know.
So come to find out, my grandfather, my mother's father, was a police officer in a little small town in North Carolina.
Don't say that.
A place called Siler City.
Wait, Chris,
Holy crap.
What?
Didn't you see it?
Right, somebody goes pointing behind you, you don't immediately turn around, Chris. Don't be a dipshit. So yes, my mother was 5 years old in 1955. My mother was born in 1950, and she loved her father, and her father loved her, and for all accounts, he was a fairly good man, supposedly. What I didn't know was that when he was 5 years old, he came home one day, walked into his bedroom, and shot himself in the head with a shotgun. He killed himself. Very tragic part of my family's history. So I never met the man. I did not know him. I've only ever seen pictures of him. And it was kind of a taboo subject. You know, suicide often is a taboo subject. But nobody really wanted to talk about it in my family. And the reasons why and whatnot are neither here nor there. But eventually things got too tough for my grandfather to deal with things that he was incapable of dealing with. And so to my mother's recounting of the story...
Oh my God! There! Look there, Chris! You can't tell me you didn't see that!
Yeah, I saw it all right, sister.
You do see it!
Get out of here!
I just...
Domine Parte, the spirit of sanctity. Domine. Other Italian words to get people to leave. Bad ghost. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. Wait, let's finish investigating. We didn't even go this way. Did we? Locked. So, it was quite tragic. Nonetheless, my mother says that he came home one day and she was out on the front porch playing as a little girl at 5 years old, playing with her doll. And he patted her on the head, nice little tot, and he walked inside and he killed himself. Quite horrific, guys. Very, very much so. Quite horrific. So, fast forward to King Pigley being a little boy, nobody had ever discussed any of this stuff with me. You know, like I said, it was very taboo subject. Nobody really wanted to talk about it in my family. And at this stage of my life, I had no idea that he had killed himself. I was, like I said, I think I was 8 or 9 at this point in time in my life. I knew that he had died, but I didn't know how. And more importantly, when I came to stay over at my grandmother's house, what I did not know is that I slept in the room in which he had killed himself. My grandmother had never moved. She had decided to stay in that house. She never remarried. She never moved. And she had lived there alone for years at this point in time, you know. Up and over. There we go.
This little key? What I tell you, the ghost
up
is
and
helping
over,
us.
up and over. That which is kind of strange in itself. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of weird to think that my grandmother never moved.
What is going on?
And I'll get back to that later because I have reasonings that King Pigley thinks that that it happened.
Hiding there, waiting for
But like I said, fast forward, it was in the early 80s. King Pigley was a young boy, and summer came, and I went to go stay at my grandmother's house, which was always a fun time for me. I always enjoyed it, even though her house creeped me out. And you know what? My grandmother, I love her, but she was kind of a creepy old lady. You know, if you really think about it, she lived in a house where her husband killed himself. She was old at the time, so she had white hair. I mean, just as white as snow. And her arthritis in her hands was so bad that her bones and her knuckles, you know, on her hands had eroded back to where her thumb would actually curl backwards. And her fingers were twisted sideways, so she had really gnarled hands. But I love my grandmother. I mean, she was the sweetest old lady, but to look at her, she was kind of spooky, you know? And, like I said, Mom finally agreed. Oh, I hate done this and that. OMG, Mike confirmed. Mike, and more Mike. This is all her I love Mike stuff.
So awesome. Fires and hot tubs.
Mike's a douche. Currently, Mike's running around with wolves and shit, setting places on fire on top of the mountain.
It's so sad, Chris.
So, back to King Pigley's ghost story. So, you know, I had often said to my grandmother that the house kind of creeped me out when I would go and stay there, but she would always assure me that everything was fine. Now, the room that I slept in, like I said, when I was a boy, the room that I slept in, when I slept over at my grandmother's house was indeed the room that my grandfather had killed himself. But also unknowns to me, there were 2 twin beds in that room. And, you know, back in the day, in like the 30s and 40s, you know, 50s, you know, Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver. If you don't know what any of that is, Google it. They're old TV shows, but there was I don't know. It was just a feeling in that room. But the old twin beds, see, married couples used to sleep in 2 separate beds. And little did I know that not only was I sleeping in the room that that my grandfather had killed himself in, but I was also sleeping in his old bed. Okay? So, oh my God! Nothing to be scared of.
Oh.
And why did Chris run in? Like Chris ran in there. Like, oh, I see a ghost screaming at me. I'm going to run inside the room.
See it, Chris.
Makes sense, Chris.
I saw it.
So, so yeah, there I was. Now, my grandmother, as I said, I complained to her quite often that this house was her house was kind of creepy and creeped me out. But she would always assure me,
That is so random.
she would always assure me there was nothing to worry about. She would always assure me that things were perfectly fine.
Look.
And that there was absolutely nothing. There was absolutely nothing to be concerned with.
Huh.
Yeah, we'll keep those. You got that right. So, one night in particular, it was bedtime, and I told my grandmother that I was really creeped out that particular night. I don't know why, but I was creeped out. And I told her that I didn't want to sleep in that room by myself. So my grandmother, being the sweet lady that she was, decided to sleep in there with me. That it was perfectly fine, that she would sleep in there with me and give me some company, you know, so I wouldn't be alone in this scary room, which I very much appreciated. And so we went to bed.
I don't know if I want to keep going.
So, about 3 o'clock in the morning. In fact, I know exactly what time it was because I remember looking at the clock. Now, this is burned in King Piggly's brain, guys. This happened, okay? This is a actually paranormal experience that I had. And the reason I know that it really happened is a couple of reasons. One, I never went back to sleep. So this was not a dream. I woke up and then I stayed awake for the rest of the night after this happened. But I have, it's detailed, vivid, detailed memories of this stuff, guys. So, I woke up at 3:23 in the morning, which, you know, 3 a.m. is the witching hour, there's no doubt about it, and universally agreed amongst occultists and paranormal investigators that 3 a.m. is when the veil between the spirit world and our world is the least strong, I guess you would say, the thinnest, if you will. So King Piggly woke up, little Piglet woke up, Prince Piglet woke up at 3:23 in the morning. Now I know this because on the nightstand next to the bed, my bed, was a digital clock, and that digital clock read big red letters 3:23 in the morning. Now when I looked at the clock, I went to roll back over, but at the foot of my grandmother's bed, I saw someone standing there. Now at first,
Well,
King Piggly didn't think anything about it. Ooh, I'm getting chill bumps just thinking about it again, guys. Holy smokes. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but King Piggly's hair is standing up on my freaking arm. Let's see. Sympathetic.
if it was you, don't you think you would have run away?
Right.
I mean, who likes being made fun of?
Seriously, you guys douched on her real bad, Chris.
People don't make fun of me.
So when I noticed that there was somebody standing at the end of my grandmother's bed, my first thought was it was my grandmother coming back from the bathroom. Because you know how old people are, guys. I mean, the older you get, if you don't know, by the way, here's a little tip for all you young people out there watching. The older you get, the more you're going to have to pee. It just kind of starts happening, guys. So by the time you're 60, 70 years old, you're probably getting up once or twice in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. That's just the way of it. So I just assumed that that's what was going on with my grandmother, that my grandmother was coming,
Sam's bracelet.
oh no, it's
She
Sam's
never
bracelet.
took this thing off.
That it was my grandmother coming back from the bathroom. So I just kind of bleary-eyed looked at it for a minute and I said, Granny? I called out to it, Granny, and it didn't answer at first. And I do mean at first, because the second time I called out to it and I said, Granny, a man turned around and said, what? In a very angry voice, like it was irritated by me, bothering him, you know, asking him the same stuff over and over again.
These. Are these fake?
They look
Why
fake to
would anyone
me.
make fake newspapers?
Crazy people trying to fake stuff. So when it said what, I clearly, at this point in time, it kind of turned towards me when it said what. And when it did, I saw that it was my grandfather. I'd seen pictures of him. He was still in a police uniform, strangely enough, but I could see through him. He was quite transparent, but he was gray. It was kind of like, he kind of looked like you would if you turn a TV off in a dark room. That's what he looked like. He looked like the glow of a TV that had been turned off.
You know what?
And, of course, I was terrified. You know, I was absolutely terrified. And I threw the covers up over my head, and I just kind of sat there patiently waiting. And I just knew that the covers would slowly be pulled down, and, you know, he would be there. But the minutes passed by. We got to find Sam. And as the minutes passed by, nothing happened. And I slowly pulled the covers back down, and he was gone.
When you're right, you're right.
I was terrified, guys. I don't know how else to explain it. I immediately got up. I woke my grandmother up. Again, she didn't seem shocked. And you know, hindsight's always 20/20. When you look back on past events, the older you get, and you kind of look, you know, at what people said or did, it becomes clearer that, I don't know, certain things do. They just become clearer. And, you know, now that looking back on her, she was just so nonchalant about it. Like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. My grandmother never tried to talk me out of the fact that she didn't say you were dreaming. She didn't patronize me at all. She didn't try to make King Pigley feel
Chris,
like he was crazy or that she didn't believe me. She just assured me that everything was fine. And I got up. I didn't go back to bed. I went out to the living room, and she actually made me some hot chocolate, and I sat on the couch for the rest of the night. Or, you know, like I said, I woke up at 4:23, or 3:23 in the morning, so I stayed up until the sun came up and on to the next day. But, you know, I told my mother, and I told my brothers and stuff, because King Pigley has 3 older brothers, and you know, I tried to tell everybody what had happened, but they never believed me. They just never did. They always said it was my imagination, or that, you know, I this, that, and the other. They all had their own crazy. I mean, clearly you've been set up. By this time, if I was seeing all this stuff laying around this mansion, I would know 100% that somebody was messing with me. Chris, keep up. So, you know, I started thinking about it, and, you know, one thing after another kind of led me to believe and understand that that house was absolutely haunted, and that my grandmother knew about it. You know, I've often looked back on the reasoning why, like, you know, certain things, you know, certain things never made sense. Like, one, my grandmother never remarried. I mean, my grandfather killed himself in 1955, guys. She was not an old lady at that point in time. You know, she was in her 40s, but she certainly wasn't old. You know, and she never left the house. Now, most people whose loved ones would kill themselves in a house would sell it and move. You know, they wouldn't want to keep living in the same house, living over the same things over and over again. And it's just not the case with, oh, she looks so constipated. Oh, that was better. She got it out. She's fine now. Way to go, Ashley. So, you know, now that like I said, now that I'm looking back on it, and hindsight being what it is, guys, I think I've come to understand that my grandmother was very, very, very much aware of that house being haunted, and that the one man that she loved so dearly was trapped in that house, most likely, because he had killed himself there. Strangely enough, you fast forward up to 2010, my grandmother also passed away in that house. She didn't die in a hospital. She stayed in that house until the day she died. And, you know, it's just one of those things. So there you go, guys. That's King Pigley's ghost story. I know it's not the most ultimately terrifying thing, but it is absolutely true. And I wanted to share that, guys, with you on the most spookiest of holidays, Halloween. But that's it, guys. I'm going to stop it right here. And thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. Let's read some comments, guys. I hope you enjoyed the ghost story. If you have a ghost story, I'd love to hear it. I'd love for you to leave it in the comments section. Also, let me know what's going on, with you guys. Halloween plans. Did you have a good Halloween? By the time you see this, you might already been out and partied or whatever. Leave it in the comment section because I love hearing from you guys, and I may just read your video read your comment in the next video. So speaking of which, let's read some comments. The first comment comes from Terminal Goat. Terminal Goat says, Changeling is a good old school scary movie kind of thing. Well, that's not what he said. He says, Changeling is a good old school scary. I think he meant scare. But yes, Changeling is a good old school scary movie. I agree with you, Terminal Goat. Thank you for your comment. And the next comment comes from Dark Rob 21. Dark Rob 21 says, Wolfman's got nards. Well, yes, he does. To the surprise of us all in the 80s, Wolfman did indeed have nards. And if it wasn't for Horace giving him the old kickerino, they would have been done in that mention. But absolutely, Monster Squad, great movie. Changeling, horrifically horrible, old school scary movie. And that's it, guys. That's it for King Pigley. If you haven't done it yet, go ahead and smash in that like button. Let's get this video up to 30 likes, guys. We can do it. Together, we can do anything. And I can't do it without you. In fact, none of this would be possible without you guys. I'd just be some weird dude talking into a camera, talking to himself. So please, smash in that like button. Help me out, because when you hit that like button, it lets me know you're enjoying the content, and that's super important to me. That's actually the most important thing to me. And it also lets YouTube know, though, that you're enjoying my content, and it may just help me out with the algorithm. So please, support the channel, support King Pigley by hitting that like button. Also, if you haven't done it yet, guys, go ahead and click that bell. Get the notifications. Keep coming back and hanging out with me here on Gaming Imperfectly. Don't miss out on the next imperfect video from your host, King Pigley, the most imperfect host in all of YouTubedom, because you don't want to do that. So click the bell, guys. Get those notifications. But that's it for King Pigley. I hope you guys have a absolutely spectacularly spooky, horrifically horrible, yet wonderful Halloween. And, oh, guys, I am going to take a few days off. Before I wrap it up, I'm going to take a few days off. We did 31 days of horror. I managed to get through the whole thing. Thank you guys so much for being so supportive during this last 31 days. We are going to continue to review movies here on the channel when King Pigley comes back, but I am going to take about 3 or 4 days off just to kind of recoup from 31 days of horror. But that's it, King. King Pigley's out of here, and I will see you guys in the next video.